We're starting with LSU and Auburn. Look, this is what Jimmy just spent 2 hours on, but it is, I think, the argument can be made that it's the most storied rivalry in the last 35 years in college football. Maybe not the best, maybe not the most passionate, but in terms of stories and moments, it's hard to beat. I mean, I'll just run through the list. 3 years ago, you had Cole Tracy from 42 yards out. 4 years ago, Auburn got up 20-0 and Chark ran the punt back. 5 years ago, you had the loser leaves town and Les left town the next day after LSU lost to Auburn on that last play of the game. 6 years ago, Leonard ran wild. 14 years ago, Flynn to Bird. 16 years ago, John Vaughn misses 4 field goals, including one in overtime. And 17 years ago, the no call on early Doucette and pass interference on the Plains. 19 years ago, leveraging, not leveraging, missed extra points, whatever. 21 years ago, how the West was won for LSU. 23 years ago, the cigar game. 25 years ago, the night the barn burned. 26 years ago, LSU brought back the Magic. 33 years ago, the earthquake game. You can keep going on and on and on. And when I say those games and just give that one little title, everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. Jeremy, I know you played in a couple of these games, and it's as wild a run as we can recall with any other opponent.
Yeah, it's definitely. And then when you line it up against Auburn, you know it's going to be a physical football game. It seems like historically Auburn just has a tough D-line every year, and LSU has the same. And you know it's going to be a physical football game. And when you have two SEC West teams who really want to win the West and get to Atlanta, it's some battles out there, and it's some historic, memorable battles that we've had with Auburn. And I think Saturday is going to be right up there with the best of them. Just two teams who seem to be evenly matched. It's going to be a great night in Death Valley for the Tigers to line it up.
Throwback Thursday will involve one of those games I just ran down. Now there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 13 games to pick from. One of them will be featured in hour number 2. But let's turn our attention to what we're going to see under the lights of Tiger Stadium tomorrow. Or I guess it's not Friday yet. On Saturday, we'll see under the lights. And this Auburn team, their identity is well known at this point. Brian Harsin is in his first year, so we don't have the Gus Malzahn offense that we've looked at for the better part of a decade. But what you have is a team that has 2 tremendous running backs, led by Tank Bigsby, a offensive line that's been good, not great, but pretty good. And you've got a questionable wide receiver core that they're still looking for playmakers on the offensive end. So what they want to do, line up and run it, Jeremy. I think that's what we're going to see no matter who's under center on Saturday.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of Shivers, a lot of Hunter, a lot of Bigsby.
Yep.
They're going to be feeding those 3 and finding creative ways to get those guys the ball. Shivers is going to be the jet sweep, gadget play guy, and then Bigsby can do everything that you want from a running back. Inside the tackles, outside the tackles, breaking tackles downfield, has speed, has power. And Hunter, he's averaging 10.6 yards a carry as a freshman, so that's nothing to poo-poo over. He's going to make his plays as well. So our defenses are definitely going to have to bring their lunch pails on Saturday because they're going to have to go to work and be ready to have that mentality, man, because those dudes are definitely going to try to come set the tone early on and get their run game going.
This is something that we talked about last night on the Tiger Zone, and it's Auburn's statistics as a whole I throw in the trash can because they've played 3 tomato cans. However, when you look at them and you just take the Penn State game as a snapshot, they're not that far off. So they kind of are who they are. I mean, obviously you can take Bo Nix's 20 out of 22 in week 1, and that doesn't matter. But, they turn around and handed Tank Bigsby 23 times against Penn State, and he ran for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's not like he's run for 230 every game against Akron, Alabama State, and Georgia State, and then struggled and got 60 against Penn State on 25 carries. No, it's still pretty consistent. So, yeah, you mentioned the 10 yards per carry from Jarquez Hunter. Well, no, it wasn't exactly that against Penn State, but he did run it 9 times for 63 yards. He found some room to run. He also caught it twice in that game. So I think we're still at a point in the season where you're not going to take statistics as a whole in college football for a lot, but you can take that Penn State game and I think learn a lot from it, and that's where I start is that, yeah, Auburn's run it really well against 3 terrible teams, but they also ran it on Penn State.
Yeah, in a tough, hostile road environment. Everyone knows Penn State had a whiteout game for Auburn coming into town, so they were ready. Their fans were ready, the atmosphere. They were ready for a big college football game, and Auburn still showed up. That was a one-possession game for a lot of that game,
Yep.
And Auburn battled. They were in a position in the red zone at the end of the game to tie it up, and they just couldn't get in the end zone. So That's a tough road battle for them. They know what it's like, this roster, to go on the road and play in a tough environment. Saturday will be no different. It's going to be another road tough environment for them and for us as LSU fans and LSU faithful. If we get to a fast start, the quicker we can get them out of the run game, the better it'll be for us to really win that game.
So I still want to stick to that Penn State game and who Auburn is. They got behind in the second half of that game, and they took over the ball at their own 15-yard line. At the 25-yard line, down in that game and said, okay, we're going to get back to who we are here, and that's what we're going to stick to. And they drove it down 75 yards on 15 plays, and 59 of the 75 yards, all but 16, were on the ground. We're going to give it to Tank. We're going to give it to Hunter. We're going to let Nix run a little bit, and we're going to move the football on the ground. And they went down and scored a touchdown, a 9-yard plunge by Tank Bigsby. That drive to me, as I look over that entire game, I look at highlights, I look at stats, that's the drive that speaks to me. When Auburn makes up their mind, they're going to try to run the football, and that's where LSU's got to stop them. Yeah, it's looked better the last 3 weeks, but it looked awful against UCLA. So what gives?
Yeah, I think it looked to me in the first half against UCLA. I'll have to look up the rushing stats they had, but I'm pretty sure it was less than 100. They weren't really gashing us to me. I don't remember really getting gashed in that first half. It was more of a fatigue thing that game, and you saw our rush defense get better and better by the week. And obviously last week you can kind of throw that one out. We're never going to run that defense again with 3 rushers and open up all those rushing lanes. So I think for us, we definitely have to have 7, 8 guys in the box this whole game. And really, I think our best strategy would be try to make them pass. Sometimes I wouldn't mind if you see 9 guys in the box. Whatever we can do to get them out of what they love to do and comfortable doing, and that's just hand the ball off to their backs and letting them take them down the field, we can't allow that to happen. So I think if I'm Durante Jones, we're flipping that strategy all the way around from last week, and we're throwing 9 in the box this time.
Auburn's had some really strong number 1 receivers in past years. Seth Williams was great. Da'Keil Williams from right here in Louisiana was a freak talent that they had out there. And they've had some really good ones. This year, entering the season, they didn't necessarily have one that you were locking in on. Demetrius Robertson, probably the most likely candidate. He's a Georgia transfer and is a really good athlete. He missed last week's game with an injury. He's expected to play this week in this game, and I expect to see him. Now, he hadn't been going crazy through the first couple of games. He's been okay. He's had 3 catches against Akron, 3 against Alabama State, had 5 catches against Penn State for just 23 yards. He did score twice against Alabama State, but he's probably their best option through the air. Kobe Hudson is another really good athlete. He's 6'1", sophomore, and he gets about 3 catches a game and has been pretty productive for them. But they don't have that alpha out there, and I feel pretty good about LSU's secondary dealing with these guys in a vacuum. Now, you're not in a vacuum because you've got to stop the run and get some help from everyone else in the secondary because your front seven's handling their business. But they don't have anybody that strikes a ton of fear in my eyes from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, not at all. And I think you were watching that game last week. I think Georgia State did a phenomenal job. That's kind of why Bo Nix got taken out of the game. He just couldn't find his receivers consistently enough to put enough points on the board. And I think we have the matchup on the outside. I think with Cordell Flock coming into his own, I think that nickel spot is shored up for sure. And obviously we know we have Eli on the other side. And I think Dwight played well last week to be thrust into the lineup. Obviously with Sting being the starter. So I love all 3 of our cornerbacks. And then obviously Jay Ward and Major Burns have made leaps compared to the first week of the season. So I think we have those matchups on the outside. It's going to be hard for them to really throw the ball down the field and test our DBs. So it's going to go back to the run game. We're going to have to really have those guys in the box and try to shore up that rush offense.
The more I look at this, I mean, this has just happened to dawn on me during this conversation because I chatted with Blake Baker yesterday, LSU's linebackers coach. It was for our pregame show on Saturday. And we were just talking a little bit, and I said, man, this has got to be a little bit of a different week for y'all, especially in the linebacker room. You go from last week where they're going to throw it 70 times a game to this one where it's a physical run game. He said, yeah, last week everything we worked on, you just throw it in the trash can and move on to this one. And then I start thinking back and I go, this is kind of like got some UCLA vibes. They've got 2 really talented backs that they're going to try to run behind. We got a veteran offensive line just like UCLA did. And while, of course, there are guys on the outside that can make plays, they're D1 scholarship Power 5 athletes, they can make some plays. The worry is between the tackles, and then you've got a veteran, mobile quarterback who's been up and down in his career. DTR, likely Bo Nix, unless it's Finley. But there's so many similarities to UCLA, And obviously LSU knew what they were getting that day and had no answer for it, which is troubling to say the least.
Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely, you can't just overlook their run game and think because they're going on the road in a hostile environment, we're just going to shut them out and they're not going to put up a fight. They're going to be trying their tails off to get that run game going, because if they can get their run game going, silence the crowd, sustain long drives, get points on the board, it's going to make it so tough for us, especially if we can't get our run game going and keep them off the field. So a lot of similarities between those two, and I think when they do get their run game going, it's going to make Nick's job way easier in the passing game. Then they can start running the RPOs and then working all the little, fancy stuff that they do with the jet sweeps and all that stuff too. So got to shut down the run game if you want any chance to win this game.
Let's hit the rewind button for 3 weeks. What happened to LSU's run defense against UCLA start to finish?
Yeah, started off really hot. They were struggling to get any big plays, especially in the run game. Defensive line looked like they were playing sensational. While we thought they were so heralded and so talented. And then as the game wore on, the offense really couldn't sustain drives, kept the defense out there. And then they just start, their wheels start taking over. They start running the ball with both of their backs and then mixing in the play action behind it. And then as a defense, you're guessing. When defenses are playing well, they can keep you in predictable situations. We couldn't keep them in predictable situations. They were third and short situations, and they were getting their run game going. So I think if you look back at that UCLA game, just starting off fast but continuing how you played in that first half, I think the outcome would have totally been different.
Do you think it was adjustments that UCLA made, or LSU just busted assignments or wasn't good enough?
A little bit of both. I think, now that we've watched that film and looked at it, they were doing a great job getting our linebackers sucked up in the run game. They knew we were in man coverage. When we were in man coverage, they knew exactly when we were doing that. And then when we were caught in man coverage, they were running the perfect routes to run, crossing routes, deep crossing routes with tight ends. And like I said, those are all things that can be avoided if you can shut down the run game and keep them in passing situations.
Hadn't thought about that. It's funny how you have a show prepped and you're sitting here and you got everything ready and you got what you want to talk about, your talking points, and then conversation starts rolling and then you're thinking, that sounds familiar. We just did this 3 weeks ago and it didn't go very well. So hopefully LSU's learned from that. We think, based on as what we've been talking about, this step by step since that day, McNeese is the bottom rung, Central Michigan, Mississippi State, and then Auburn. You continue to climb. You hope in that month that things have gotten better. You would think they would have. The X factor is obviously who the quarterback is. And so we'll kind of touch on that here briefly. Ed Ogeron, I was surprised to hear him say this last night on his coach's show. He says he thinks it's going to be TJ Finley. I don't know what gives him that indication, but he says that's what he thinks. I spoke my piece on it yesterday. I'm sure we'll still touch on it over the next 2 days, but I think that Bo Nix will get the start based on all the circumstances that surround it. He's got more experience. He's had some really good days. It wasn't like he was a disaster. He does not have the added anxiety of it being his home state and first start. I think TJ will play in this game. I think Nix starts it.
Yeah. I think if I'm Auburn, I tried out there Nix. He's been in too many road, heavily contested football games and played in those atmospheres. Obviously, he hasn't got a lot of wins on the road, but he's been in that environment. He knows what it's like. He's taking care of the football this year. And if you want to have a chance to win in Death Valley this weekend, you're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to not turn it over, and you're gonna have to run the ball. And I think Bo gives them their best chance. And to me, he's a little more athletic on his feet. More than TJ can pull it down and do some more stuff with pulling it down in the run game as well. So if I'm Harsin and the crew, I tried out Nix, and if for some reason he looks rattled or is not playing well, then you're probably going to see TJ in there pretty fast.
Greg Lehman in the Bayou Ford chat on the YouTube channel says, "Oh, might be playing chess with Harsin." Look, I certainly will admit that kind of stuff does happen. Football coaches everywhere are so paranoid, so measured with what they have to say, so concerned with all things possible that it's in the realm of possibility. Do I really think that Brian Harsin is making decisions and game plans based on what Ed Ogeron says, posted up at TJ Ribs, eating some brisket quesadillas, says? I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it's certainly, it's a thought worth pondering. I mean, look, coaches are crazy about things like that.
Oh yeah, they and that's one thing. The older I got in the football world, the more and more I saw every coach preaches one message: ignore the outside noise. Ignore the outside noise. The outside noise gets in, man. It's hard to keep it out. You got family members now. It's social media. You got fans. You got people walking up to you. You hear the tea leaves. You hear the stuff out there. It's almost impossible to keep that stuff out. So I know that's what they're hearing over there. And I know a lot of the Auburn faithful, they're really happy to see TJ come in the game. They've seen 2 or 3 years of Nix. And sometimes the new guys, like we've seen this at LSU, the backup quarterback gets a lot of love on campus. So I'm sure that's the very thing with TJ over there right now. They think he can be the savior for their season. So I would not be upset at all if that was the decision they made.
Cortland Jacobs says, I love that he's been in that environment argument despite him never winning in that environment. That's fair, Cortland, but I don't think you have to win in a life experience for it to matter some. Just having been in a stadium that loud trying to get a play in. Yeah. Just because you lost a game in that environment, during your time doesn't mean you haven't done it before and understand what it takes. Mm-hmm. I mean, TJ's never seen it before. Yeah. I mean, I just don't think you have to win the game necessarily. I mean, you don't think that Bo Nix gained some valuable experience as a true freshman playing in Tiger Stadium, losing a game 23-20 to the best team that he's ever seen? I think there has to be something gained from that.
Oh yeah, 100%. You can't just poo-poo experience. There's a reason why we give so many of these teams with veteran offensive lines who quite didn't have the success in the past, but now that they're veteran, you expect that leap. You expect them, to be better off. You expect them to know what not to do and what to do in those situations. And I think I brought up the experience because for some reason they go 3 and out their first 2 possessions. Quarterbacks that's been in that environment, they're not going to freak out. They're not going to get worried. They're not going to get rattled. They're going to keep battling. They're going to keep going out there trying to make plays. And I think that's what Bo can bring to Auburn this weekend.